And welcome back to another edition of Flyers Files here on 97.3 ESPN. I have you solo today as my co-host Kevin Dorso just has some personal things that he needs to attend to. But we do have a lot to talk about with the Philadelphia Flyers. It has been a busy week for the Orange and Black. And it's also been a week where no goals have been scored. That is correct. The Flyers, they did lose today to the Colorado Avalanche in another shutout, right? So they got shut out by the Avalanche, then they get shut out by the Islanders, shut out by the Devils. That is 3 consecutive shutouts for the Orange and Black, and it is the first time in franchise history that this has actually happened. So I guess the Flyers are making history in that sense. Also, if you were living under a rock, there was a trade that went down this week between Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee being traded to the Calgary Flames. And in return, the Flyers got Kuzmenko and Pelletier. And the locker room, I have to tell you, I spoke to 5 different players in the locker room yesterday, Saturday, before they went out to the West today. But it was definitely a little bit somber. So we have that to get into. And Matvei Michkov becomes yet again another discussion. Listen, I know he's a rookie and rookies can make mistakes, but it doesn't feel right to me that he's getting such limited time on the ice and he's getting benched for reasons that I just don't agree with. So let's begin with the elephant in the room, the trade. So the Flyers were hosting the New York Islanders Thursday night at the Wells Fargo Center. Late night puck drop, 7:30. Late for me. Anything after 7, that's when it gets into late territory. And rumors began circulating around the second period about a trade. And a big name that came up was Kuzmenko. And he has played, by the way, with Matvei Michkov in the KHL before, so a lot of people were speculating that that was the reason why, and I'll kind of get into some more of that stuff later, but that was going on. And Joel Farabee, for whatever reason, was a name that people were also kind of like hinting at. Nothing, though, from like any official reporters, but a lot of people were like, what's going on with Joel Farabee? And I was one of those people that thought that, actually. So Morgan Frost ends up leaving the game a little bit halfway through the second period. People thought it could have been an injury because he did take a big hit on the ice. But then again, for Morgan Frost be one of the players getting traded. But here's the thing. It was not certain due to the fact that he could have been hurt from the hit. Joel Farabee played the entirety of the game. So after the game, we go down to the locker room, right? And at that point, I believe that we knew Pelletier was involved in this trade too. And we say to Sean Couturier, hey, have you heard anything about this trade? And he's like, no, what's going on? Like, he had no idea and he was genuinely confused. And players and media, right? We have interesting relationships sometimes. But when a player is actually confused and they want to know something, they're probably not going to go to the media right away unless like they genuinely don't know what's going on. So I got the sense from Couturier that he just had no idea. Then we get into the press conference room where Coach John Tortorella speaks to us after a game. And when he was asked about Morgan Frost, he said, I think he's just sick. And at that point, that's when it kind of clicked for me. So he's not injured. He's sick. They pulled him because they knew they were trading him. And you might be wondering, well, why didn't they pull Joel Farabee? Why did they allow him then to play the full 60 minutes? And after general manager Danny Briere spoke to us yesterday, it seemed like Joel Farabee was like a very last minute addition to this trade. So it seems like Morgan Frost was basically locked in, but Joel Farabee was kind of like a late piece. So anywho, that's basically the gist of it. The news officially was confirmed, I believe, around like 12:30 in the morning because I had to wait for Calgary to finish their game. But when Danny Briere spoke to us, he said that the problem with a lot of teams in the NHL and why they weren't interested, right, was they didn't want to take on Joel Farabee's contract. I mean, $5 million AAV is a lot. And they also were unsure about Morgan Frost and his ability since he's had quite an up and down season. So when you factor all of that together, you sense a team like Calgary, who does have a cap space, would be more interested in doing so, but they're not going to give you back in return what you ideally would have wanted. And while Danny didn't say that he was upset, because again, you are relieving cap space, I personally feel like besides getting back Andrei Kuzmenko and Jakob Pelletier, you got back a second round draft pick for this upcoming draft. So now the Flyers have 7 draft picks within the first 2 rounds. And then seventh round draft pick in the 2028 draft. So like that's nothing. But I would have liked a first round draft pick ideally, but again, they are taking on Farabee's contract, and it helps out Philadelphia quite a bit. So that is basically what went on with the trade. Now we have the locker room issue. Well, not an issue, but it's definitely a little bit somber. So I had the opportunity yesterday after practice to speak to different players on the team, players that I knew were really good friends of Farabee and Frost. One of those guys was Cam York, and he was upset to say the least. And he said that, they're going to make Calgary a much better team. He's excited for them. And I feel like in my article, right, when I posted it, people kind of took that the wrong way. I think for Cam York, those were his best friends. And he did acknowledge that it is a business, but I'm sure it is hard for him to lose those guys. And Bobby Brink spoke to him as well. And he even said it too, that, he knows that there's other guys in the NHL that have lost their friends due to trades, but it still sucks. A player that I thought had a really good insight was Jamie Drysdale, because Jamie got traded here in return from, remember, I don't even want to get into the whole Connor Gauthier, but yeah, we got Jamie. And he said to me that he texted both of the guys, Kuzmenko and Pelletier, and reached out to them and said, hey, you're welcomed here. If you need anything, let me know. Because Jamie said that he knows how it feels to be the new guy. And I think that's one thing about Jamie Drysdale that impressed me the most was his leadership and just the responsibility that he took upon himself to make those guys feel welcomed, even though he hasn't seen them in person yet. So I think for Jamie, he has come full circle. I spoke to Jamie the first day he got here, and we did a one-on-one interview then. And it was getting to know Jamie Drysdale. And he's just matured so much as a person. And, he talked to me about his game too. And he said, I know I could be better. And I can appreciate a player kind of taking accountability. Hey, I know I'm not playing to the full potential that I should be playing at, but I really am trying. And that does mean something to me, at least. I like when players put effort in. Another thing that Jamie said to me, and this kind of took me by surprise, because Jamie was being very candid. He was being very open and vulnerable about his experience being traded. When Jamie first came here, one of the things that him and I talked about, ironically, was the fact that he didn't have a bed and he was sleeping on a couch. And as funny as that might seem to some of you, oh, well, he's a professional athlete. Can't he just buy a bed? He said it was just very overwhelming, the whole process of going coast to coast in a sense, right? And being at the rink was the one thing that made him feel better, was being able to be on the ice and skate. And he said, the thing with being traded, it's not like the offseason where you have time, you have to get right into things. So he said that he can sympathize with the new guys, right, with Kuzmenko and Pelletier, about all of the adjustments they're going to have to make. And he had a hard time putting it into words, he did. But essentially, he just said that hockey is the one thing that's going to help them the most adjust, just getting on the rink and just kind of getting into things. And social media played a big part, too, for Drysdale. He told me he just had to get off his phone and not look at it. So I can 100% respect that it's a difficult thing. Finally, we have not Cutter. Oh my gosh, Cutter. We have Garnet Hathaway. I don't know why I was thinking of Anaheim Hathaway. So the thing about Hathaway is he's one of the leaders on the team. And he's been treated before. He played on the he played on the Flames before, for crying out loud. I mean, he is one of those players that was brought into this locker room to be a leader and to teach the young guys how to be an NHL player. And he said, obviously, it's tough, but what got me is despite how Hathaway, and I'm trying to put this into words and don't take this in any way, but Hathaway is one of those guys that is so much more mature than the rest of the locker room at times that I sometimes forget how he is still young. Well, not like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's not like, he's in his 30s, but still. And he said, it feels like there's a piece missing right now, and it's going to feel like that for a while. And that's what stuck to me, because he was saying, oh, yeah, it's an adjustment. Trades happen. It's a business. But when he said that to me, I was about to walk away, and he stopped me, and he told me that. And that, for whatever reason, stuck with me, because I truly think that this team did get close. There's no doubt about it. And Hathaway said he's going to obviously welcome the new guys in, and he doesn't want them to compare themselves to Frost and Farabee. But I think that when you see success on the ice and you see how close the locker room is, you can say, oh, this is great. They have the vibes. They're great on the ice. But when it's the opposite, right? When it's a really close-knit locker room, but they're not doing well on the ice, then it's like, ooh, they're too close. It's too much about friendships and not enough about hockey. I think that this team, they're not a playoff kind of team, obviously. And they're not going to be this season. Danny Briere did say, he still wants them to be competitive, but he's not going to be able just to flat out say, yeah, we're going to tank to get a good draft pick. The Flyers, with their loss tonight, are now within the bottom 10 of the NHL. I'm happy about that. I'm sorry, but I'm happy about that. Ideally, in this draft, you want to be in the bottom 6, bottom 7, maybe, at least. And I think for Philadelphia, they obviously have a goalie issue. And I spoke to Sam Ersson about being added to Team Sweden's roster. I spoke to him yesterday, too, about it. I spoke to a lot of guys yesterday. And again, he said it was such a big honor for him. And I do feel for him, because he was a backup goalie that got put in a situation to be a starting goalie. He's had to deal with some injuries and things along the way, but it was a lot that the organization put on him last season. And in my opinion, this season, because his backup is Ivan Fedotov, and this is not a diss on Fedotov. I think that the expectations were too high just based on how he played in the KHL. But I think if Sam Ersson is going to succeed in the NHL, he has to be a backup. I do. Alexei Kulisov, I just don't see him yet in any way being a solidified backup. Now, he is on the trip because the AHL is in their all-star break, and Danny Briere was like, well, why not just add him just in case? But this team is a mess right now, if I'm being completely transparent. Rasmus Ristolainen is now injured, and he wasn't on the ice for the entirety of the third period. I also was speculating, as one does, that he might be somebody that gets traded. I just can't say that the trades are done yet for the Philadelphia Flyers. It is Sunday, February 2nd, when I'm filming this. The trade deadline isn't until March 7th, and there is so much going on in the NHL right now. The trade market, you have JT Miller going to the Rangers. You just have so many different things going on. And I think that Danny Briere is a smart general manager. I do. I think that this team is in a situation where they need to be sellers. You don't need to buy. Do that this offseason. And that's what Briere kind of hinted at too when he was speaking with us, that they have a lot of draft picks and they can do things in the offseason, but it's the contracts. Now, do I think they're going to get rid of a Tyson Forster, Cam York? No, I don't. Do I think they could get rid of a guy like Scott Laughton? Yes, I do. there's not many guys on the team that I would cancel out from being traded. I think mostly all of them, even maybe Owen Tippett. I know that he just signed a big contract extension, but I think that Danny is very well aware that this is just not working. The expectations that some of these players had, they're not even coming close to meeting. And it's not just guys like an Owen Tippett or a Tyson Forster. It's really the whole team. Now, a player that I feel like has been doing exactly what he needs to do is a player like Nick Seeler, a player like Eric Johnson. There are certain players where they know what they need to do and they do it well. Especially Seeler, the block shots that he had today, it's great. Konechny, he works so hard on the ice. And he truly is the team's best player at the moment. I just think that he's somebody, especially with the contract, that you keep Michkov, obviously, and then everybody else. And I hate to be like this, but if another team is willing to take them and give you back some good assets, why not? And that's how this team needs to be. They need to just be open-minded about the possibility of letting some of their beloved players in the organization go. I think for me, I was watching the Calgary Flames game against the Red Wings last night. They lost, by the way. And I saw some of the things that Frost and Farabee did that would frustrate me as somebody that covers this team, with the turnovers, the lack of spatial awareness, so many different things. And I thought, I'm like, this is not this team's problem anymore, talking about the Flyers. And hopefully with Calgary, they can grow. And obviously, I think, and I've said this all along, I think Morgan Frost needed a fresh start. He needed to be just in a different type of environment, coaching-wise. I could get into a whole thing about that. I'm not going to. And same with Joel. I think that they kind of plateaued here, and sometimes you need that change of scenery. Now, John Tortorella did say that he is going to speak to both Frost and Farabee over the break, because there's a couple of things that he didn't get to say to them that he wants to say. So I'm hoping that goes well, and I'm sure it will be. But right now, this team they just need to sell. So if you think that this team has a chance of going to the playoffs, maybe kind of reevaluate your thinking. And listen, I would love more than anything to cover a playoff hockey team. I would. It's just not going to be this season. Speaking of John Tortorella, Matvei Michkov has not been on the ice much. Okay. Islanders game. I know that game there was so much that went on that game, I have to tell you. It was just one thing after another. But Matvei Michkov played about 8 minutes in the first frame. That goal went in. He didn't have enough zone coverage. Like, it happens. Him and Tortorella were screaming at each other on the bench. And then Tortorella benches Matvei Michkov with only playing 8 minutes. So after the game, Tortorella says, well, the reason why I benched Michkov is because I care about him. And this is because I care about him so much. In my personal opinion, I think that benching Matvei Michkov after that incident is a mistake. Players are going to make stupid decisions. They're going to make mistakes on the ice. It happens. It's part of the game. But every time a player messes up, benching them isn't the solution. And I think for Michkov, he's such a competitive player. I mean, he's a competitive person even. He's always so focused. And that's one of the qualities about him that's going to make him a star. But I think that what Tortorella is doing with benching him and limited ice time, putting him on the fourth line, by the way, isn't going to help his game. It's going to just create more issues, in my opinion. I mean, Michkov can say that him and Tortorella are fine, and I'm not creating or insinuating anything. But again, limiting him to such short amount of ice time, and even in today's game, not a lot of ice time. After 2 periods, he only played 8 minutes on the ice. So I think that there is an issue. You have a star player, a player with so much potential. You can't just bench him every single time You're upset with something that he does on the ice. I get wanting your players to take accountability. I get that, I do. But that's not a solution. And then I see posts from the fans, and I can sympathize. I can, because I guess prices went up, and now the player that you wanted to see, you aren't seeing him. You're seeing him sit on the bench. And that's not what you paid to see. Obviously, things happen in games to where you can't always see certain players, and obviously, I don't think John Tortorella's like, oh, I'm gonna sit Michkov so that way the fans, they don't get to see him. No, I think that is the last thing on his mind. But I can kind of sympathize with the fan base and say, oh, I can get how that could be frustrating. But again, it is still a long ways to go before the season comes to an end. It even feels like a long ways to go until the trade deadline. We just have so much hockey. But I wanted to get your opinion on the Flyers' trade. Obviously, I wanted your voices to be heard because you guys have a lot to say. And I see it on social media. And I think that at the end of the day, you can respect what a player has done for the community, the organization, and even yourself personally. We all have favorite athletes. And I think that's important for you to understand that you're allowed to feel upset that a player didn't pan out the way that you wanted them to pan out here. So, anyways, I asked the question, what did you think about the Frost Farabee trade? 71% of you said smart move. 25% of you said Briere made a mistake. And then I said other, which meant for you to comment. So this is Brian, and Brian says, it's just depressing. I got into hockey as a kid when Lindros was on the team, and they took off. And despite them playing like garbage for the first 15 years, the Flyers, they were relevant. And now it's been 15 years of irrelevancy. 3 straight shutouts, no clear picture with who exactly is a 1C. And yeah, so he continues to go on for a little while. And Brian, what I would say to you is this: Danny Briere is very aware that there is a lack of depth with centers. He made that very clear yesterday. I would not be surprised that if the Flyers acquire a center, especially this offseason, that's going to 100% be a focus of them going forward. So thank you again, Brian, for checking in. Rock and roll. Well, it's Rockarola said, it's just going to be a long, painful wait till we see any good from this rebuild when we've already had to wait so long for any kind of success. And that's another thing that I see a lot too on social media, and what people are saying is, how long is a rebuild? When is it going to be rebuilt? And what I'm going to say to you is this: Chuck Fletcher did not do a good job. We're all aware of that. However, I do trust Danny Briere and Keith Jones, because Danny Briere did something with trading for Austin Farabee that Chuck Fletcher would never do. He got rid of players that were so beloved that people saw the potential in, but they just couldn't grow with the team. And instead of just keeping them on and just hoping that one day they're going to end up playing some really good hockey, he said, I'm done with this experiment. It's over. Time to move on. So I can respect that 100%. Mark said, the trade, it was the right idea, but I would have liked to see a first rounder in return. So here's the thing. I personally mentioned too, I would have liked to seen a first rounder 100%. But again, getting rid of that $5 million and then altogether was like 7.1 AAV for a couple of years is pretty good cap relief. So I can't complain too much about that. And then, so anyways, some guys said insight on what? Well, what I told you about what the players said. This franchise sucks. Oh, they shed salary. These were 2 draft picks that turned out to be bad. So, okay, here's the thing. when the Flyers traded captain of the St. Louis Blues, Stanley Cup winner of the St. Louis Blues, Brayden Schenn. I also cover the Blues, by the way, so that's okay. Anyways, they gave the Flyers first-round draft picks, which the Flyers used to get Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee. And clearly they didn't work out. I mean, listen, Nolan Patrick didn't work out. There's been a lot of draft picks in the first round that the Flyers got pretty recently within the past 10 years that just did not pan out. Yeah, it's a little bit frustrating. So I can understand. And I can understand that people don't want to hear about the culture and the locker room. And I get that to an extent. But I think having that insight, right, that information, and just knowing that these players truly did have somewhat of an emotional impact is important for you to understand. There is a problem with this team. Maybe they are too buddy-buddy. Maybe I'm not seeing it that way, but maybe they are from all the things that I'm saying. Maybe this team doesn't have a winning culture to them. They all said during training camp that they wanted to go to the playoffs and they could see themselves going to the playoffs. I see a team that's not motivated now. I see a team that's somber and upset and frustrated. And usually when you lose the team and you lose the energy, who is always the first person to go? Oh, I know, the head coach. But I don't see the Flyers getting rid of John Tortorella this season. Maybe next season. I know his contract won't be done, but maybe he'll be up in the office, right? I just don't think, realistically, he will be fired this season. And I think that when John Tortorella goes, Rocky Thompson will go. And the power play, it's an issue. Now, the penalty kill is great, and Bradshaw is awesome, so I'm happy with that. The PK is great. But the power play, it's been a problem for years at this point. And prior to the season beginning, Rocky Thompson said, and even Danny Briere and John Tortorella, they all actually said and confirmed this, that they were going to have some monthly kind of meetings with a bunch of people that are power play specialists to go over the power play and to make adjustments. They need to at least have multiple meetings a day if they want to actually make any adjustments, because the power play, again, it's one of the worst in the NHL, and that's not good. Special teams is important, but when you have the extra man advantage and you still can't accumulate anything, and in today's game against the Avalanche, not only were the Flyers on the power play, they also pulled Ersson out of the net, so they had 7 skaters on the ice, and guess what? They still cannot score. I mean, not 7, 6. 7, 6. Now I'm thinking football. They had 6 skaters on the ice and they could still not score. So it is a really bad situation for Philadelphia. And it should be something that you're concerned about. I mean, I personally don't know what this team can say to justify some of the decision making that they had. I mean, you can't justify keeping Rocky Thompson. You can't justify keeping some of these players that have been problematic. And now that they're shaking things up and the players are so sad about it, I get that they're your friends and they can always be your friends, but they just weren't contributing to the team in a positive, successful way. And that's essentially it. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but hey, listen, if a player or players aren't working out and they're getting paid a little bit too much, what is the point of having them with your organization? I do think Ristolainen is going to be traded. Sean Couturier is actually one of the people that I have as well. I know that he's the captain. I still think he's going to be traded if they're able to. It's a lot of money. I doubt any team will take him, but I think they're going to try. And then, of course, Rasmus Ristolainen. So those are the guys that I have. And next week, Kevin Dorso will be back talking Flyers hockey with all of you. It has been a lot of fun doing this today, but definitely miss Kevin here and can't wait to get his insights on everything that went down. Again, my name is Haley Taylor Simon. You can follow me on Twitter at Haley T. Simon. as well on Instagram, and you can check out all of my work there. And until next time, again, thank you. And this has been Flyers Files on 97.3 ESPN.